Now, many times today, people misinterpret the prayer of Jesus, John chapter 17, in saying that the whole religious world ought to come together and get along. Jesus wasn't praying for those of the religious world at large to have their varying doctrines and their varying manuals and creeds and disciplines all to come together and simply get along. That wasn't what He was praying for. He was praying for all men to be one in Him. All men to submit to the gospel that He committed to the apostles. For all men to follow that standard, to obey that standard, then to be united in that faith. That's what He was praying for. We need to understand that. And we see that in Acts chapter 1 and verse 14. How sad it would have been for Jesus to have prayed for unity, for Jesus to have died for unity, and then for the church to have begun with division. But it doesn't. It begins with these disciples united. They've come together. The death of Jesus has brought them together as it brings all men together. In Ephesians chapter 2, you remember that when Jesus died, He broke down that middle wall of partition so that there were no more twain, but now one, Jew and Gentile even, being able to come together with great unity. I don't know if you know how amazing that is, but those that have been separated for thousands of years come together and they're united in the church. To understand master and slave, bond and free, to understand male and female, to understand all of these distinctions that existed in their society far greater than they do in our society. And yet when these individuals obeyed the gospel, they came together and they were one. Those who had been raised as Jews, those who had been taught the old law their whole lives, and then those who had been taught Greek philosophy. And yet they obeyed the gospel and they came together and they were one. And we see that unity among the disciples of Jesus on a very early occasion. We see Matthew, a publican. We see Simon Zelotes, a zealot for Jewish interest against Rome. Matthew, a publican who is sold out, if you will, to Rome. And yet those two men come together and they are with one accord. Will be a one accord in this group. We see those who otherwise would have been opposed, dramatically opposed to one another, who, because of Christ and because of His death on the cross, they come together. And so the prayer of Jesus is answered. It's answered in the unity that we see in Acts chapter 1 and verse 14. But notice Acts chapter 2 and verse 1. Acts chapter 2 and verse 1. It says, "And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place." Now, it could have simply said they were all in one place, right? But it doesn't. It says they were all with one accord in one place. You know why it says that? Because sometimes we can be in one place and not be in one accord. That happens, right? Sometimes there are brethren sitting on the same pew perhaps, sitting in the same building, sitting across the aisle from one another, who are in one place, but they're not with one accord. They're not united. They're not of the same mind. They're not of the same judgment. They don't have the same goal. They don't have the same love that they ought to have. And so they were with one accord in one place. When the church starts with great unity. The Godhead is united. No question about that. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost are united. They're working together in the establishment of the church. Jesus is building His church. He sends the Holy Spirit to the apostles to guide them to that end. This has been God's plan from eternity, Ephesians 3, 8 through 11. They're working together as they did in creation. Now they're working together in the establishment of the church. Perfect unity. But we knew that there'd be perfect unity there. But Jesus' prayer is that they might be, that the disciples might be one as the Godhead is one. And we see that kind of unity in Acts chapter 2. And it's a beautiful thing that when the church started with that kind of unity. Now the point that we want to make is that kind of unity is possible. It existed when the church was established, and if we will go back and we will We will build the church that we read about in Acts chapter 2. If we're willing to follow the pattern that God has given us, then we can have that unity today. Why is it that there is so much division today? Because people have left the early church. Because people have left Acts chapter 2. Because people have left the pattern that was given. That's why there's the division that exists today. Because there was unity at the beginning. That unity was simply lost over time as men began to do what they wanted to do rather than what God said to do. You remember that Paul warned that was going to come. In Acts chapter 20, even before he left Ephesus, he was telling those Ephesian elders that I know that after my departure shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. He said they're going to draw away disciples after them. And he talked about those that would come who would forbid the eating of certain meats, and those that would forbid marriage, and the falling away that would take place. There was unity at the beginning, and it's important for us to understand that. Notice as we go later in Acts chapter 2, the verses that we read today, where we see this unity. That's unity as the church is about to be established. Here is unity as the church has been established. We read of the church in verse 47, but notice the unity that we have. And they, continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart. Notice they are together. They're together on a daily basis. They're together, and there's gladness, and there's this singleness of heart. I remember one time when I was growing up in Alabama, we didn't get a lot of snow there, but one winter we got some snow. And it just so happened that my cousins, I've got three first cousins who are very, very close, and they were at our house. And they got snowed in at our house. And we got started playing cards. And we played cards for about 3 days straight. Now, there's something in the Webster gene that's competitive. I don't know what it is, but every one of us is competitive. There's none of us that likes to lose. And so we're playing, and we're playing, and we're playing, and we're playing Rook, and it gets more and more competitive, and more competitive. And my brother shot the moon without even looking at his cards and made it. And that just was that was the icing on top of the cake. I mean, we just and finally it got to the point where the roads still were bad. You shouldn't be out on it. And my dad said, "Okay, y'all need to get in the truck. We're going home." And he loaded them up in the truck and drove them home. It had gotten to the point to where the roads may be dangerous, but you're going home. You can't be here anymore. And so there wasn't that kind of unity that there should have been in that situation. Well, sometimes it gets to the point to where there's not the kind of unity that there needs to be. There isn't this singleness of heart. There isn't this one accord that needs to be there. And sometimes the more time you spend together, the worse that is. You ever taken your children on a long vacation where you had to drive 6 or 7 or 10 or 12 hours somewhere? They're all in the back seat. Spending a lot of time together, right? Quality family time together. But what happens? Someone's taking up more of the seat than they ought to be taking up. Someone's singing along with a song. Someone, whatever it is, the more time you spend together, the harder it is sometimes to have unity. But the early church, they were continuing together on a daily basis, and yet they had unity. They were one. How did they do that? How could we do that today? Well, it's possible, isn't it? But I want to suggest something that you're not going to like. There are several answers, I'm convinced, to this question of how we can have that kind of, why they had that kind of unity. But I want to suggest to you one thing that gave them that kind of unity. It hasn't yet occurred in this context, but it's coming. It's coming very quickly. That is persecution. That's persecution. Now here they have this unity because they are enjoying a common salvation. And they're excited to be Christians. They're excited to have their sins forgiven. And so they're one. But what's really going to shape and mold them together and melt them together, if you will, are the fires of persecution. They're going to do that. Because it's them against the world. It really is. And if they're going to survive, they're going to have to come together. And if you think about what our situation is today, and you think about why the church isn't as united as it once was, I think one of the missing ingredients is that persecution. We don't form the kind of bond that we ought to form because it's just easy in our world to kind of make our way through our world without ever having to form that kind of bond. But you see, what we've lost is we've lost that it's us against them mentality. We have forgotten to see the picture that we are separate from the world, we're called out from the world, and we've got to stand together against the world. That's a team concept, right? And teams that are successful understand that concept, us against them. And it's not that we're necessarily looking at the world as the enemy. We just simply realize they're not one of us. They haven't done what we've done. They don't share what we share. And so we have to stand together in our efforts to win them and to be victorious. And these early Christians were doing that. They were with one accord. Now go to Acts chapter 4 very quickly and notice verse 24. Acts chapter 4 and verse 24. And you continue through the book of Acts. The church is continuing to grow. And sometimes the more you grow... You ever heard the expression growing pains? And sometimes when you grow, there are certain pains that come with that. And sometimes the more you grow, the more minds you get together, the more potential there is for division. But the early church is still united. Even though they're spending a lot of time together. Even though some time has passed, they're still united. Acts 4 and verse 24. And when they heard that, they lifted up their voice to God with one accord and said, Lord, Thou art God, which hast made heaven and earth and the sea and all that in them is. The persecution's already started. The apostles are praying for boldness here. And they're praying this prayer together, one accord. They're united in this. They are not divided. They're continuing to stand together. Now, one thing that you have to understand about the devil is that the devil is a great divider. And the devil tries to get those that are supposed to be on the same team at odds one with another. Because they're far less effective if they aren't pulling together. They're far less effective if they're fighting one another or jealous or envious of one another. He knows they're not going to get much done that way. And so the devil constantly is seeking to divide. Now we see that in all areas of society. Children learn that at an early age, don't they? You go and you ask mom for something, she doesn't give you the answer that you want to hear, and so you go separate apart from mom and you ask dad for it. Now, Dad's not privy to what Mom said. If he's smart enough, he'll say, "What did your mom say?" But sometimes he'll simply hear and, "Okay, you can do that." Well, now, Mom said no, Dad said yes. Right? There's a split. There's a divide. What's going to happen? Is the child going to get their way? Is the first answer going to rule? There's a split there. It happens in church situations too, doesn't it? I've seen situations to where a person would approach one elder and ask them something and then turn around and approach another elder and ask them something. And get a split between two elders and what they feel ought to be done. And then there's an effort to drive that wedge and to separate that more. Sometimes there's an effort for preachers or elders to separate congregations from one or the other. That same type of idea here. I've seen preachers who separated the congregation from the eldership in order to get their way, in order to get their will. I've seen it work the other way too. It can happen. This division can take place. But here, they're united. And persecution, of course, is a part of this. They've come together. Acts chapter 5 and verse 12. It says, "And by the hands of the apostles were many signs and wonders wrought among the people. and they were all with one accord in Solomon's porch. Still, the unity that we're talking about. Not just in one place. They're in one place. They're in Solomon's porch. But they're one accord in that one place. They're united in that one place. Go to Acts chapter 15, verse 25. Acts chapter 15 and verse 25. It seemed good unto us, being assembled with one accord, to send chosen men unto you with our beloved Barnabas and Paul. Now, when we get to this point in the book of Acts, we have moved beyond just a Jewish membership. Now we have a Gentile membership as well. We have the Gentiles. Cornelius' house in Acts chapter 10 has been converted. The Gentiles, the door to them has been opened. So we have those that are spending a lot of time together, and they're still getting along. We have the church, and the church grows, but they're still getting along. They're still united. We have all this time that passes, and yet the church is still united. Now we bring another element in, where there has been great dissension in days gone by, and yet even in spite of that, there's still unity that's taking place. And here we have them united, being assembled. And it doesn't have to say being assembled with one accord. It can just simply say being assembled. There's the one place aspect of this. But the one accord takes it to the next level. They're in one place, but they also have one mindset. They have one heart. They're united. Again, it's not enough to merely be in one place. That's not unity. Unity is when you're in one place and you have one accord. That's unity. There are churches all across our land that are meeting in one place today, but they don't enjoy unity. They're not of one accord. They're not of one mindset. Brother Cates in school used to say you can take two tomcats, you can tie their tails together, and you can hang them over a clothesline. And you've got union, but you never will have unity. And that's true. And you can take two brethren and you can put them in the same building together, but that's just union. Until they have the same mindset and they're working together for the same purpose. And then that's unity. Then you've made the transition between union and unity. And we're not striving merely for union. We want unity. Now in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 2, if you'll turn over there, we're outside of the book of Acts, at least to some degree. We're in another book, even though you know that the background of Philippi and this epistle is in the book of Acts. And so it's a little past Acts 15, Acts 16. That context is where we begin reading about Philippi. And so this really fits within the book, even though it's recorded in another book. Paul says in verse 2, "Fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord." Now here we get an understanding of what it means to be of one accord. It means to be like-minded. It means to have the same love. Let's think about it this way. There are any number of husbands and wives that live in the same house, but they're not one accord. Solomon talked about that, right? Dwelling on a rooftop. One house, but not one accord. Same place, but they're not united. Their goal, their purpose, their love is not the same. That can happen in religious circles as well. It can happen in the church. And that's what we're talking about right here, is being of this one mindset. Having this same love one for another. Go to Psalm 133. Psalm 133. Let's branch out just a little bit and talk about unity. A little bit bigger picture. Psalm 133. Psalm 133 is all about unity. One of the most beautiful passages in the Bible dealing with this subject. This is a song of degrees of David, we're told. Did David know anything about division? He knew a little bit about it, right? He knew a little bit about the division that took place. He knew a little bit about Saul and Saul's envy and Saul's jealousy and what Saul was doing to the kingdom. He knew about it even in his own family, didn't he? Absalom stole away the hearts of the people. David knew something about division. And so when David writes these words, they become of special meaning because they're coming from one whose heart has been torn asunder. And yet notice what he says. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It's like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard, that went down to the skirts of his garments, as the dew of Hermon, and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore. Now think about this. He says, first of all, behold. I want you to see something, he says. I want you to see the most beautiful thing in all the world. And here it is. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. You know, there are a lot of words you could pick to describe unity, and yet I don't know that you could pick two better words. How good. Good. Unity is good. If it's the proper kind of unity. Again, if we're talking about unity and not union, two tomcats tied together over a clothesline is not good. But two brethren walking hand in hand, arm in arm, same purpose, same love, same mind, that's good. That's the way it's described. It's good. And how pleasant. How pleasant. Think about the opposite of that. Unpleasant. Have you ever had to be around, spend time with someone who did not like you? There was just a problem between the two of you. There was just sometimes you may not even know what it was. You just knew this person doesn't like me. There's a problem here and I don't even know what it is. And yet you had to spend time together. Maybe in school you got put in a group with them. Or maybe at work, they said the two of you go do this. Put on the same job line together. It's hard. Really hard. How unpleasant that can be. To pass the day without talking. To pass the day constantly having to be on guard. It's unpleasant. But how pleasant it is to be able to be with someone that you can just be yourself with. You're comfortable with. You as always watch what you say, but you're not overly cautious because you know that if it doesn't come out right, they're not going to take offense to it. They know you didn't mean it that way. They're going to be forbearing with you. You're going to be forbearing with them. Pleasant it is to be in that kind of a situation. That's the kind of unity we're talking about. Notice he says to dwell together in unity. Again, we have one place with one accord. Dwelling together is one place, right? But the Bible doesn't stop there. The Bible doesn't say you've accomplished your purpose when you come together in one place. No, you haven't accomplished your purpose until you're in one place, in one mind, one love, in unity. That's when you've accomplished your purpose. You see, so often we stop short of what Jesus prayed for. We get together in one place and we say, okay, we have it. No, we don't. We may still be a long way from it until we get our minds together, until we get our love together. Notice verse 2. It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down upon the beard, even Aaron's beard, that went down to the skirts of his garment. Think about the priesthood. Think about what the priesthood was supposed to be about. It was about the people coming together with God. This is the unity that they came together as a congregation before God. That's the picture that's being painted here. It's like the dew in verse 3. Oh, how beautiful this is, a picture of unity. But we've got to move on. Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4. Now, once you have unity, and we can have it, we've already seen that. We've already seen that the early church had it. But once you have it, you can't just assume you're always going to have it. Because if you do, you'll lose it. You have to constantly work on it. Notice in Ephesians 4 and verse 3, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Endeavoring to keep. Now that, I don't know how you read those words, but that suggests to me this is not going to be an easy task. Endeavoring. It means you don't have to put forth a lot of effort. This is going to have to be given constant attention. You know, in a marriage, if a marriage is going to be good, you have to endeavor to keep the unity. You come together as one. You're together on the wedding day and you blow out the two candles on the side. You have the single candle in the middle. You've got unity, we say. That's the unity candle, right? You've got unity. Then you've got, for the rest of your lives, to endeavor to keep that unity. To endeavor to keep that same mindset. To endeavor to keep that same love one for another. It's hard to do. Ephesians 4 and verse 13. Till we all come in the unity of the faith. Here's the unity of faith. That's what Jesus prayed for. That's what we're striving to have. Any number of passages talk about it, but let's look at 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 10. Wish we could talk about all the passages that use the word same, because it's one accord. That's the way it's being used. But in 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 10, Paul was praying for the Corinthians. And again, this is not the religious world at large. This is a congregation of God's people. Here's the unity that we're talking about. It says, Now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, that there be no divisions among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. Here's the church at Corinth. We read about the beginning of this congregation, don't we? We move our way through the book of Acts, missionary journeys of Paul, Corinth. There's been unity. They've been in one place with one accord. But now here are brethren meeting in one place, and they're not meeting with one accord. They're divided. How do you get back to that kind of a unity? How do you get back to being perfectly joined together with the same mind, with the same judgment? How do you get back to that? Once it's lost, how do you get it back? The Bible says endeavoring, right, to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So it's going to take work to get back. Husbands and wives aren't getting along. Can they ever get it back together? Sure they can. They've got to work to get it back together. It's not going to be easy. There's got to be forgiveness to get it back together. There's got to be loving one another more than you love yourself to get it back together. So it is in congregational setting as well. Why was the church at Corinth divided? They were immature. They were ignorant. They were worldly. All those things were dividing. They had to get back and realize they had been called out of the world. Realize that they had all these things in common. They shared all of these things. And again, be that church. You may want to notice on your own Philippians 4 and verse 2. We have two sisters that are at odds one with another, and Paul gives them instructions. The best church perhaps Paul ever established, with whom Paul was associated, was the church at Philippi, and yet even it struggled at times with unity. So it doesn't matter how great the congregation is, from time to time, there'll be some struggles in this area. We've simply got to work through those struggles, realizing that it's worth the effort. realizing that Jesus prayed for us to be one, and we need to do our part in the fulfilling of that prayer by doing our best to be at one, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit. Thank you for your attention.